evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are at. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for giving this time wherever you are at. Thank you for being right there in front of us, just hearing and educating yourself and giving awareness with your heart and mind. This is Vision, our section in Lima, the Global Environmental Lawyers League Worldwide. Thank you for being there. Today, we have a wonderful live climate talk with a beautiful guest speaker. She is SUSANA HANCOCK. Hi, SUSANA, how are you?
I'm well, how are you? Thank you for having me, Carrie.
It's an honor to have you. I'm so excited for your presentation. So we're gathered here together to educate and get aware to everybody about our new topic this couple of months from the report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, Code Red for Humanity. Okay, again, Code Red for Humanity. So we are here together gathering to educate you what that means and how we can be as individuals in no code red. SUSANA, thank you for being here. I will literally read your bio to the public so they know who you are and what you do. SUSANA HANCOCK is a PhD, is a multidisciplinary researcher engaged in Arctic climate, geopolitics, and environmental anthropology. She began her academic, listen to this, she began her academic career as a 14-year-old astrophysicist at the University of Southern Maine. However, feeling drift, due to the political apathy over climate, SUSANA refocused on Earth. She has completed fieldwork in a variety of places, including Iceland, with the British Antarctic Survey looking at glacier retreats, and in Norway looking at identity politics in Sapmi. This winter, she will conduct fieldwork in northern Siberia with Nenets reindeer herders. Her PhD research in the Middle East on intractable conflict and some projects in China have also spurred her interest in the role of rights holders in the Arctic community. SUSANA is now focused on Arctic geopolitics and is particularly interested in international climate action. This involves working on several reports for the IPCC, chairing a team with the United Nations Ocean Decade, and now leading a new team looking at the social geopolitical impacts of climate change. She routinely writes policy papers and articles on a variety of subjects related to Arctic climate and is currently working on a book on the impact of research on climate change. Trained in both natural and social sciences and with extensive nonprofit and political experience throughout the world, SUSANA works to have a global impact on environmental policy and the climate crisis through multi-sector collaboration. This is impressive, SUSANA. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you again for inviting me. Thrilled to be here.
So I think that one of the things that we need to understand is that our Code Red for Humanity is not today. I mean, it's like years ago. We are in Code Red like years ago, and just now the IPCC just gave us the Code Red alert just to make us more conscious, or like the ones that are not conscious to be conscious or something like that. I mean, it's weird. First of all, for anyone that does not know what the IPCC is, please, SUSANA. Yes, because I'm talking like from colleague to colleague, and I'm like, okay, do you know what the IPCC is? Okay, here we go. SUSANA, please, what is the IPCC?
Yeah, I'm going to, well, you've given several questions there, what the IPCC is, why it's suddenly code red when we've known about this for a while. So I'm going to share a little short presentation about what the IPCC is, how it works, and hopefully this can help show what the process is, the science behind it, why it's something we really can understand to take truthfully, and why it's taken so long. So if I can screen sharing
yes, you can share a screen, right? Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, we don't know what IPCC does, like what his specific job, why he gives reports, and why, like how long you were part of it. So please share your presentation.
Yeah, I don't have screen permission yet.
Oh, Tere, ¿puede compartir la pantalla, por favor?
Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias. There you go.
Right, here we go.
Gracias, Tere.
Okay, so this will just be a little introduction here.
Mm-hmm.
So, Code Red for Humanity. So this was a phrase that came out of Antonio Guterres, who's the UN Secretary General. This was part of his reaction to the report that came out the other day. So the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. It was formed in 1988 as an independent body created under the auspices of the World Meteorological Organization and the UN Environmental Program. Most familiar to us, perhaps, is that it informs much of the work of the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change and its Council of Parties, which are known as COP meetings, which began in 1994. And these meetings have shaped global environmental policy and legislation such as the Kyoto Protocol and most recently the Paris Agreements. So that's really what its purpose is and how it's structured. But how it functions is much of its work is done in working groups. So I was part of the second working group and the third working group. And I'll talk a little bit.
I'm sorry. I will interrupt you so I can ask you questions. I want the audience to understand that we are talking to a reviewer, to an expert, to a writer in the reports of the IPCC. She's not a nobody like me. She is somebody that knows what is going on, and she is somebody like, she is in the inside of everything. So whatever she's saying is the real truth that happens. I want all the details. How you guys like literally fight there to write the report. So so you know what is going on, and you know how they write it and why they write it and how you research to write an IPCC report that everyone is talking about, right?
Yep. So I'll get into that in a moment. But I just want to say that, it's the science is really consumed within these three different working groups. And so the first working group is the one that just came out. And that one looks at the physical science of climate change. The second one looks at adaptation and vulnerabilities around the world. And the third one is mitigation. What do we do? How do we limit these issues that are happening? So the first document, the work of the first group was released 2 weeks ago, earlier in August. And this is the one that has been declared Code Red for humanity. Second and third groups were supposed to come out this fall, but because of COVID, they're now coming out in February and March. And then there'll be an entire report synthesized from all of this material coming out in a year, about October of 2022 right now. So while we don't have the full report going into the COP meeting this November in Glasgow, as we had hoped, we'll only have the first working group. We do have that science of knowing what's going on right now, and that hopefully will inform the meeting in Glasgow. So this is this first report, and it's the one that abruptly Code Red. Unfortunately, as CARRIE mentioned, Code Red isn't new. It's not novel. We've known about this. We've been working on it. But this body, the IPCC, has, for various reasons, been very conservative in its language, its wording. It's only really wanted to put out what it can really support. And if there's any kind of political hedging, it sort of has been backing off. So previous reports did say, we think humans are part of this. And the first in the mid-1990s, they were saying, this is definitely, climate change definitely has a human aspect. But that's as far as they were going, and as early as 20 or 30 years ago. And so it's really just been recent that we've started to say, this is going in this direction of people causing the problem. And this is really the first report where they're not talking about what the future is going to be, that people are causing this and we're going to have this problem. They're talking about what's going on now. And that's really where that Code Red now. We're having the talk about the immediate, and we're talking about what is definitely happening, not what might be happening or what we should be steering away from, which is what the previous reports have done.
So I have a question there, yeah. Susana, if you may allow me to ask.
Absolutely.
These reports are written by experts, by scientists, by reviewers. I mean, they are not people, they don't know what they're doing. Like I go there and I don't know nothing about physics and I just go and just make a report, right? Like it will be a disaster in my case. But so they're experts and scientists that they know the facts, that they know that they study the facts, like meteorologists, that they go there and know what the sun is doing, what the stars are doing in the universe. Like they know what they're doing, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, this diagram here, you can see this is the process of creating just one of these working groups.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So if I take this working group document that was just released 2 weeks ago on Monday, the reason that this has so much weight behind it and the reason we can really put our faith in this document is that it was written by not one person, 234 people came together to actually write the document. It is built upon 14,000 scientific papers, and the document itself is 3,949 pages long. The agenda for the first meeting of these authors was 38 pages long. So this is a lot of material here. And then, as you can see in this document, go through the scoping phase of what are we going to be talking about, and then the approval of the outline, nomination of authors. So authors need to have some kind of gravity to their credentials. They're not people that are casually interested or don't really know what they're talking about. These people know the science, know the material. And then they get together and they put together this first draft. And this draft is sent out around the world to expert reviewers who are expert subject matters in some area in which this report covers. So these are people who don't know everything about the report. They'll read, really what they know really well. So you're getting creme de la creme of the top people around the world. So this first round of reviews created 23,462 comments, which were then addressed and incorporated into the work for the next draft. That next draft went through another review phase, again going out to some of the same, some different experts around the world, and it generated 51,387 comments. So these comments they're not comments about grammar or spelling. These are comments about, have you checked this article? Or look at how this paper puts something in this paper has a different finding over in some other country. How do we rectify these? So these comments are all little puzzle pieces that need to come together to understand the global picture. This draft was also at the end approved by 195 governments. So that's the process and the number of people and entities that are involved in creating just one of these documents.
So let me understand something, like governments have to approve the facts that they're reporting?
Yes.
Oh, why?
So partly because we need government buy-in. If governments aren't going to support this, what's the point? I don't say what's the point, but we're asking governments to make such big contributions to reducing their emissions that we need to be transparent. And that's one of the things that this process is really good about.
You know why I ask you? Because we go to the news, we're sitting in our home, in our sofa, and then we have BBC, ABC, CNN, co-read for humanity. And we think that the politicians or the governments of every single country, these 195, don't know that the IPCC was going to give this co-read for humanity, that they were not knowing this, that they were totally in an anonymous mindset. And this is not like that. They are aware, and they gave the green, the green dog to say, yes, send it out and say, God read for humanity. They gave green light for that.
They did, but it's not necessarily the entire government. So it might be a representative.
Okay, there we go. Now we are talking. Now we are talking.
Exactly. So, and some of these discussions become less about climate and more about politics too. So we have discussions that are around climate, but you've got governments making deals and they're not necessarily on board. So there is a difference between approving the report and being actually on board.
Okay.
But what's important to understand is that the authors, so the 234 authors for this report, they're not making the science themselves. They're not conducting experiments. These are synthesized reports. So that means that this knowledge is already out here. So that's, again, going back to what you're saying, is why is it code red now when we've known this? These aren't new papers. These 14,000 papers have already been released and written, and some of them, they're relatively new, and most of them in the past couple of years, but some of them were written earlier. So what this does, though, is it pulls all of the science together with that many people behind it and that gravity. And it also can help look at science in new ways. It's, you've got, think about it as a jigsaw puzzle. You're putting all these pieces together and figuring out, this piece by itself isn't really significant. This piece itself isn't really significant, but you put them together and you start to create a big picture. And that's what these reports really do. So let's see if I can, there we go. One thing that this report showed, Shirley, that previous reports hadn't really done, and this is part of, again, contributing to that code red, is that it shows that global temperature has risen more in the past 50 years than at any other point, 50-year period, predating Cleopatra, Christ, Caesar, etc. So this is, we're in warm temperatures. We need to go back 100,000 years to find another 50-year period that is as warm as this current block that we're in. And one thing that we were able to do is not just show that the temperature is rising. That's easy to show, but to be able to show what is actually from global emissions, what is natural. So we've got natural sources of CO2. We've got decaying wood. We've got forest fires that are naturally occurring. We've got volcanoes. We've got big things that emit carbon and change the climate. But getting those greenhouse gases out of there. So that's what we were able to do. So if you see this graph, that reddish line shows the temperature that we're observing. In the bottom, the blue shows what the temperature would be like if we could extract those greenhouse gases. And so that's the difference. And that's really where we're saying this is human caused. And we've known that it's been human caused, but that's where we're saying, this is the degree to which we know with absolute certainty is on us. So.
Right. And of course, we as humans tend to be literally not worrying about something till it becomes a real issue. It's in our DNA. And we instead of preventing things, instead of having first the thoughts of the consequences that we are doing, we tend to do things and then lead with the consequences to a worst, result. And this is the consequence of all humanity, the code red is for all humanity. And the ones that are aware of this is the ones that are fighting like us here for climate crisis and awareness of it. And this is the graphic that tells us that from a lot of years ago, we are fighting to let us know that we have to be aware of what we are doing on Earth.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I say that this is showing we can now show with certainty what's human caused. We've known that. We've known that for 100 years, but it's now being able to really get the data to show with certainty to those people who haven't really bought that data before. So what the challenge then becomes, and you touched on this earlier, is getting governments to buy in. How do we get those governments, how do we connect the science to the policy?
Right.
So this report has come out is known as the 6th assessment report. And that's because we're in the 6th cycle of the IPCC. So when it began in 1988, it started its first cycle. These cycles happen every 6 to 7 years. And the second cycle, which culminated in the Kyoto Protocol in 1995, really focused on showing that humans are actually contributing to climate change. So that's what I was saying. This idea in the international political scheme is relatively new. I mean, that's 20, 30, 25 years ago, 26 years ago. So that's relatively recent when we've been knowing this in the science world for 100 years. So this 5th report, so the last cycle that came out in 2014, is notable because it contributed to what became the Paris Agreement. And obviously that's the big global push that we're all working on now. The Paris Agreement, obviously it's focusing on reduction of carbon and getting carbon levels back down, emissions levels back down. But it also looks at funding. So how can countries that are more able support funding the adaptation for countries that are struggling? Because countries obviously have different degrees and abilities to support themselves and to support change. So those countries with more means are encouraged to support others. So it also looks at the adaptability and mitigation as well. So in this way, we can also, as mentioned earlier, you know, these big climate agreements aren't necessarily about climate. So this one is somewhat political. It's how do you get these different countries to work together? How do you get them to want to help each other when so many countries have a, oh, I'm going to support me. How does a country that's relatively well insulated, not experiencing big climate issues already, why should it help somebody who is? And so that's really what a lot of these agreements come down to. And
well, so, can I ask you something about that? How do you, like, you know that there's a word there that facts do not make people aware of anything. Like, you know, that facts are scientific facts. Like before I was born, I think that was a fact already, that facts are not facts for people. And I don't know why, because if I have here facts and I can relate that they're serious scientists and that these people takes time to make this for us to get aware, I don't understand why facts are not facts and they're not storytelling, but whatever, that's another thing. So how can this help us understand that this is not a joke, that our code red is like before years ago, and now it's like in the public audience just to get aware of that. But I mean, we have code red since we start contaminating all the environment, you know, like my ancestors, like we are having here the results of generations, past generations. So I cannot imagine if I am right now here remembering my grandfather telling me that the environment, that he cannot breathe, and he was like a long time ago, that like in the 100s, I don't know, like 80, 98 or something, and we are in 2021, and right now I'm having code red for something that I already heard for when I was a child. If we are code red right now, like I was like literally seeing the 2050, if we don't get alert from this code red, like governments and their policies and whatever they are doing, and the countries that they are good in a green environment and clean energy are not supporting the ones that need support, how it's going to be our environment? Like code red, what is going on with more than code red? Like future generations will not have atmosphere to breathe, you know? Like that's what I don't understand, how they cannot understand that we are all interconnected. Like this is our earth. Like everybody lives in the earth, and the air is not jurisdictional. It's not that the United States air is not the air in China. It's not the air in Australia. Like we are all interconnected, right?
Right. I mean, you look now at the wildfires around the world, and you know, I mean, Siberia, Turkey, Algeria, France, Germany, the US, Canada, Brazil, name a country. There's a good chance it's currently on fire, it seems. You know, these issues that we've known about, they're becoming increasingly relevant. So storms, tropical storms, hurricanes, cyclones around the world, they're becoming stronger. Temperatures are becoming warmer in some areas. And climate change, you know, it used to be more global warming. Try to stay away from that now, because it's not just about warming, it's about disruption of normal cycles. So some areas are getting warmer, some areas are getting colder. So it's this increasing pattern of instability, which is really what we're seeing. And this is impacting biodiversity. We've lost, I think, something like 30% of the world's birds since my mother was my age. You know, we can lose, I think they're talking between now and 2050, another 30%, maybe up to 70% of, you know, birds and insects that we're losing due to, you know, the world changing in ways that these creatures cannot adapt. Humans are quite adaptable, but people aren't. And I didn't mean to switch sides, but I did. But I'll just show this one because you touched about it. And This shows, you know, where we are today. So we're here about the 2020 mark. We are just below what Paris has given us with that 1.5 to 2 degrees. We want to stay under 1.5, definitely need to stay under 2. So we can see how much we need to actually curb our emissions to stay within that range. If we keep going how we're going, which is on the high emissions, even very high emissions over there, you know, you see our code red now, that's
we are there. I mean, just to be clear, we are there in the very high emissions.
No, well, so that's our trajectory.
Okay.
So if we continue with our status quo, so if we don't take efforts to reduce our emissions drastically, we're not going to just miss our Paris Accords, our agreements. We're going to, by in the next 80 years, have an average global surface temperature of 4.5, 5 degrees. That's not out of the question, maybe even higher. So
if we get over there, I don't want to feel people to say, okay, if we're there today where it says a circle, there's a long years ago for the code red for very high emissions. Like, we have a lot of years to live. We have a lot of life to give or whatever. We're okay. We're not, right? Like,
exactly.
That circle there, if we reach the very high emissions, my children will not see polar bears.
No, I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit later when we
right. But this is bad. It's not that today it's okay, there's a long way from very high emissions. Okay, that's not that is not right.
So no, and part of it is that we've had this policy, these previous environmental policies of basically, oh, I'll do it later. I don't need to do it now. Why change when I don't need to? And suddenly we're at this point where that need to change is completely undeniable. So, that's going back for a minute to what how Paris works is countries put in their own stock takes of what they're willing to contribute to how much they're going to reduce their emissions and how they're going to do it. And then every 5 years, the government, the sort of Paris structure gets together and analyzes how far off we are. So that next one's going to come in 2 years, and I'm kind of terrified for it. And then governments will put in their how they're expecting to improve from there. These were our next round were technically due last year. They were extended because of COVID. 77 governments still haven't submitted their contributions, and those who have, we're still not going to hit. We're still not going to stay within that Paris target. So
do you want to tell the names?
I don't know all of the names. Okay. I can look it up, because one thing that Paris does really well is everything is transparent. So if I want to know what one country is contributing, how they're actually doing it, are they actually following through? Where are their emissions coming from? How are they doing? All of that is available. And that's one of the things that it does well, is it's using the system of peer pressure so that nobody can really hide. So
that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
We need that. I mean, the audience, the public that are not legislators or just being there for taking action, and we are our voice and vote and decisions, they need to know what are they doing, and we need to have the voice. We need to have the vote. We have to decide for people that care about the earth and people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talk about this 1.5 to 2 degrees, and it's really easy to think about that as what the temperature is out your door. And that's completely the wrong way to do it. So I'll show you this map quickly, and this just has 4 different scenarios of what global change could look like. We've moved past, we're at about 1.2 degrees right now. So we're somewhere between those top 2 images. And what you should see is that 1.5 degrees, you can see how much darker the Arctic is, and different parts of the world experience that change much more significantly. So the Arctic is warming about 3 times as fast as the rest of the world, but you can see land masses tend to be warmer. So to find that 1.5 degrees, it basically takes the entire world, spins it all together, and takes a temperature sample, and that's what the 1.5 is. So you're averaging the middle of the ocean with the hottest part of the earth to get that 1.5 degrees. And that's one reason it can be really, really damaging. And you think, if we're at 4 degrees in that lower right, which is where we're headed now, without any change, see that, places in the Arctic are 7, 8, 9 degrees centigrade warmer.
Oh my God.
So
Just to be clear, if anybody doesn't understand what we are doing here, we are seeing the changes of Celsius in the global warming images in the world, like all the planets, and you can see over the superior part of it, all the red, code red that you see is the global warming covering the Earth. So in one degree, you can see there it's not so high, but it's high. I mean, I see that I'm like, I'm so sorry, God, for what we're doing, like something like that. The second one, it's horrible, and we are there going to the third one, like in the third paragraph, like in the third image, to see, and it's horrible. Like I am literally thinking my family, my future family and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know. And
yeah.
the 4C global warming, we cannot live there. And I'm going to tell you why, because every single creature that God created has its body temperature. And God knows where he established people and creatures to get their habitats. So if we're going to have this temperature, we are not going to be getting like breathing life in our bodies, you know, like the human temperature is not for every single region. That's why we live in different regions, but the air and the emissions are still the same because they come from the earth, you know?
Exactly. Everybody and everything has the adapt to adapt to a degree. And when we can adapt, then we no longer exist, and other species will exist that are more able to adapt. So yes, that 2C picture, that third image, is what we'd like to keep things under with Paris, but you can still see it's significantly different than the image above it. So why don't I wrap it up there with this focus on the IPCC, and we can...
I want to cry right now. I'm seeing this and I'm like, oh my gosh, we need prayers. God, please have mercy. Please have mercy. I mean, this is terrible, like for real. When we see it like this, because we know, because we study the environment and we are like deep in the thing. But the audience that sees this, they can understand now why everybody is talking about climate change, why we have this voice of climate change, why we're doing what we're doing. That getting awareness, getting education to people in their minds and hearts. I mean, if I will be a legislator, all I do will be legislating for the earth and the people, because that's the only life that we have, people and earth and people, like they're interconnected. That's why we have a home, you know? So this is for the public to know and get aware how bad we are. And this is not something that to take for granted. We are needing the minds and hearts in a green, clean energy economy. And we need that circular economy right now, right? So do you have, I mean, I love this question. If you don't want to answer, it's okay. Do you have threats from companies or enterprises or even governments or presidents or governors that they don't want a report for code red for humanity because it's not going to be good?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the worst for me so far has been people who are supported by the fossil fuel industry, partly because we're saying that that's an area that we really need to stop. We don't need fossil fuels. And we've known this, the fossil fuel company has known this for nearly 100 years. And they have actively spent billions and billions and billions of dollars and euros and in fighting against science and talking against, showing that global warming isn't human caused, it's natural, and that oil is, I mean, it's someplace talking about oil being a renewable resource because it came from the earth. So disinformation that's being spread around, and the finances behind it are just horrible. There's so much money, and it's really hard to fight against that. And they're very vocal, and they don't like the squeaky wheels coming in and doing what I'm doing now. So definitely hear from them quite a bit. Governments, some governments are supportive of climate action, but aren't really doing that much. There are very few that are. Shout out to the Gambia for their climate work. But a lot of nations that really can be doing a lot of work are, the US right now is Russia. They're both investing in more oil and sending out more drilling permits. This report came out, and that afternoon, President Biden in the US requested more oil drilling. So how do you work with these governments that are saying at face value, oh, we need to deal with this. This is a crisis that needs our action now. And then they turn around and their policy is something completely different. So I do find that I butt heads with some of them, and they don't always have very nice things to say.
Right. So I will literally turn the question again. President Biden just signed something for oil recovery or something. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. I am so mad at that. I read it, but I didn't know if it was a fact. Where am I in South America right now? So I have a lot of news here, but I want the real fact from people that know. So this is not a good legislation that he is doing. And it's amazing that when they get to the power, they do not make the power useful for healing the earth or healing whatever they have around them. And this reminds me that we are here because of legislation. We are here because everybody legislates themselves for wrong results, not for a we result, but a me result, or whatever they are dealing with. And they are the ones that are making the policies. They're the ones that are directing the law. We can make the people educated and aware of what is going on, but they're the ones that are legislating. And I am a very, very fan of the Bible. And one of the things that the Bible says that God makes these people that are in the legislation and have the power to make policies get aware of them, that to draw nations to what God needs from people. So they're legislating in a way that God knows, so we can go to God and pray for them and ask God to please deliver all of us from all the evil legislations that they are having, that harm all of us. And this is a result. 100 years ago, we know about this, and now we have the Code Red for Humanity, and we are here in the same room chatting about the same thing that we already know, and so I think it's not fair, but I think we have hope. And by doing this, I think that this is our job to gather together, to have our voice, our vote, and say, hey, you know what? We are here to give the people to know what is going on. So yeah, that is very concerning. And United States, China, Russia, they're the same all the time. They don't change. It's amazing. We have the same issue all the time. And it's very sad for me to know that President Biden just signed that. It's very, 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 very sad for me. But God is in control, as I always say. So after this, what does the IPCC report on scientists do? Just give the report and that's it? They wait for the next season of reports?
So periodically there are other reports that come out, and they might look at a more of a topical focus. So that will be next on the agenda. But as I said, each of those, I didn't actually have the time frames in, but when I was going through that snaky diagram of the process of writing a report, from the scoping it to its final publication, that's several years. So these are, so work on the next cycle is beginning. Right. So it is, while the public only sees it a couple days a year, as these are released, or a couple days, a decade almost, this is a process that behind the scenes is working almost.
Yes, and it's very, I mean, I give thanks to what you're doing. Thank you for blessing us with this. Thank you for everybody that's in IPCC, giving us the warning and giving us the voice to just educate us, our minds and hearts, to just go plant-based, dietitian in every single one of us, and just knowing what to do to be having a green living. So thank you so much. Please continue to do it. We need you. We need everybody. So please continue to do it. And I was concerned about the pictures when I saw the Arctic place, everything there, so melted. And I know that you are a fan of the Arctic. I know that you love the Arctic and you have a heart there in the Arctic. And I will love if you can show us your storytelling, whatever you did there, and how is Arctic right now.
Yes, I would love to, because you're right. I do love the Arctic. So if
Right.
I know. So if I can share my screen again.
Yes, please. First of all, I want to know something that I know that maybe most people do. I don't. What is like geopolitics?
Geopolitics. Yes, that's a very good question. So geopolitics, politics, legislation, country relations, however you want to define politics, because it itself is very vague, influenced by geography, if that makes sense. So geopolitics in the Arctic, one of the big themes we talk about is with the Arctic melting, there's new waterways. So there can be new shipping, new countries that are coming together. They might share a border now, or the fishing opens up. And so different countries are trying to fish in new regions. So it's bringing countries together in different ways. So that's what geopolitics really studies. How do people work together? How do countries relate? What are the influence of geography and changing geography in politics?
Changing geography, is that a thing? I mean, that happens?
Well, so for example, conflict. So as we have in the Sahel region in Africa, so the sort of sub-Saharan region in Africa,
yeah,
where there's a lot of conflict going on right now. And one of the big drivers for that conflict is desertification. So we've got drought, and that leads to a reduction in grazing grounds. So now we have the traditionally two groups of people or classes of people. We've had herders, so people who worked with animals and followed animals around, and we had farmers, so people who worked the land and grew crops. Both of those require water and land, arable land, to grow things, so that either you're growing plants or you're growing stuff that the animals can eat. So this land now, because of the droughts, is getting reduced. So we have the herders and the farmers that are now coming in contact. They didn't necessarily connect before in a way that has now led to conflict over resources. So that's one example of where the environment changes and the geography, the lands, the countries aren't moving necessarily, but the environment is changing how those people are now relating. So that's another example. So whether
we need to understand that we are all interconnected. So the Arctic geopolitics involves what exactly?
So mostly, I said the big thing is the melting ice, and seeing that there's new territory for fishing. Singapore is at 1 degree north, just off the equator, and it's arguing that it is an Arctic state, or should be seen as an Arctic state, because it is very interested in using opening waters for shipping. China as well is very interested in shipping. It's interested in fishing. So it previously had neither of those places had ever been interested in the Arctic before. But now, as the ocean is melting, these places are coming in. So that's one example of how this. But it has the issue. The Arctic's always been relatively peaceful, but now we're bringing in new players and potential fights over resources. Who has the right to drill oil there? Does anybody have the right to drill oil? Who has the right to fish? Does anybody have the right to fish? We don't understand really how fisheries really operate in some parts of the Arctic. That's not known yet. So,
well, the funny part about this is that if we all continue being like that, I always put myself first in the list. If we'll continue to be like that, they will not have any more power to take anything, because we will be all burned. So if they want to have like a result of financial in your minds, they need to understand that if they don't take care of what they are doing and what they are causing, they will not have any more money to do anything, because we will be all burned out. It's if you think about it, it's not logical. Like their ambition gets over everything, and just it's like a evil spirit that drags everybody in the same area, and that is not even logical for them. They will not have anything to do with anything, you know?
No, right. So, yeah. So I think the Arctic has appealed to me as long as I remember. But the reason that it's quite interesting in terms of climate is that we have these processes known as feedback loops. So we have two specific ones in the Arctic, and these are relevant around the world. We have other forms of feedback loops elsewhere, but two big ones in the Arctic. And these mean that once the change starts to happen, it can get to a point where it cycles out of control. And so even if we were to stop all emissions across the board, these processes would still continue and create increasing emissions. So what do these look like? On the left here, we have one where ice melts and the Earth's reflectivity decreases. So the water is no longer white and reflecting sunlight, but it absorbs the sunlight as the water is darker. So this means that the planet is then absorbing more heat from the sunlight, that melts more ice, and the process continues. On the left—
where the polar bear is, right?
Yes, exactly. So on the left, we have one that's happening with permafrost. So here we see that permafrost, when it melts, it releases greenhouse gases, and these go up into the atmosphere. The surface temperature of the Earth increases and more permafrost melts. So that's why these are both self-perpetuating, because they can continue themselves. We don't really understand enough of how we understand how these feedback loops work, but not really, we haven't understood how to get them into policy yet. So one scary idea is that the ability of these to perpetuate themselves and cycle out of control is not covered in any kind of economic model, because we haven't been able to do that yet on the international scale. So I don't know if permafrost is something that people know much of what that is and why it's a problem when it melts, because it's not just a problem for what it releases into the atmosphere, but it's very important for society and infrastructure. So permafrost is any soil or sediment rock that's continuously frozen for 2 or more years. It might be an inch thick, it might be several miles thick. And in areas not under ice or water, it's covered by what's known as an active layer, which might be a few inches and it might be a few meters deep. This layer thaws and freezes annually. So if you can see this image, I've marked out an active layer on top, and then the permafrost beneath it. So the problem when the permafrost melts, I'll go to this diagram, is you can see that it breaks up the active layer. So we get forests that are falling over. We call these drunken forests because the trees just look like they're all tipsy and knocked over. Houses can fall apart. And this is something that happens mostly in the Arctic. This map just shows areas that are most at risk for a permafrost melt. But you can see down into China, that's well off the Arctic, but they're still having some of these same regions because they've got the mountains there that have permafrost. So here,
I'm sorry, can you go to the slide again? Like there. No. What? Give me the countries there that you said that you were. Give me the image. Yeah, there.
Yes.
I mean, there I see Russia, I see Canada, I see Alaska, I see United States, Europe, like these branches, right?
Yep. So this is looking from the North Pole down.
Right. So what happens in the North Pole? Because I am like literally thinking like, why do I have to care about what happens in the Arctic? Like, why do I have to care what happens in the permafrost there or whatever? If a polar bear has not home or whatever, he dies. Why do I have to care about that? If I am in another region, I'm in South America or in Canada or in Russia, and in Russia everybody is happy or whatever. So why do I have to care what happens in these regions that I don't live there and I am not going there?
No. So good question. Why should you care? If you don't like polar bears, you know those images of sorry polar bears?
Oh, I love them. I love them so much.
I'm wearing polar bear earrings.
Yeah.
So going back to that image of the world warming, the Arctic being especially warm, that ice melts. Greenland, for example, has a lot of ice. Ice in the Arctic, if it's ice on water and it melts, it doesn't change sea level rise because it's already in the water. You know, if you fill a glass of water and it has ice cubes in it, as the ice cubes melt, your glass isn't going to overflow. But if I have a full glass of water and I drop some ice cubes in it, the water's going to overflow, right?
Yeah.
That's like Greenland, because Greenland is land, and Antarctica, we see this as well. It's land. So you're in the southern hemisphere, you've got Antarctica to worry about. It's melting. As that land, the ice melts, it flows into the water and it adds new material to the water, and that's contributing to sea level rise. And we have the Kiribati country in the South Pacific, which in 2012, I believe, bought land, 6,000 acres in Fiji, so that if it needed to relocate the entire country, it could relocate the entire country, because sea level rise from these processes in the Arctic and Antarctic are affecting their ability. They're not that far. They're low-level islands. They're not that far above, and they're losing their entire home. So they're relocating their entire country. And we see storms that are more intense, stronger, areas of drought, areas in Africa, where I was mentioning the Sahel with the increased tensions there. We're seeing this in the Middle East. We're seeing it in Asia. We're seeing it in South America. These areas are getting different weather patterns, and that's happening because of the change in regions like the Arctic. So while the Arctic is getting warmer and their houses are falling over because of the permafrost, and that may not concern somebody living on the equator, more intense storms does affect somebody living elsewhere. So there are lots of different regions, and again, mentioning that it's not just about temperature rise, it's the instability of climate patterns, and those are world over. So that's really why
that is so powerful. The instability of climate patterns, like the tectonic movements, that we have in the Earth, and we think that that something that collides in one place does not affect us. But I was thinking when you were talking, like we're in the South Pole, we can say that here, and what happens in the North Pole, it happens in the North Pole, it stays in the North Pole. And I am thinking that in the future generations, what happens in the North Pole will be like literally affecting the South Pole. We are here 100 years or more, and we are in code red, and we are talking about the same thing, and we are worse. So what happens in the North Pole now will affect us, because we have to think about the future generations that are in Earth.
Exactly, and it's affecting you now.
Right, it will eventually come. Like what I don't care about right now, it will come to me. It will get to me. Like it's a law. It's the natural law. What you don't take care, it will get you.
Exactly. And that's also a reason why this is an image. This is what's known as an ice road, and this is in Siberia, and it's a river. It's the Lena River in Siberia, and it's frozen and it's used for transport where there isn't.
Oh my God, that's on a river.
That's
there's no river there. Oh so, my gosh.
We can see these next images are a little disturbing. This is Alaska. It's another ice road, but it melted, and this truck fell through the ice. So as these are melting, if this truck contained fuel or toxic chemicals, those get into the water. And because of the lack of infrastructure in the Arctic and the cold temperatures, oxygenation levels of the water, all sorts of things, we can't clean up oil spills very well. So these chemicals don't break down in colder water. And if we can't clean them up, think of the fish, and that's going to come into our drinking water wherever we are in the world. That's impacting our biodiversity in our world around us. So, this is a house that, as the permafrost thaws, is impacting its foundation, and a road.
Where is that house?
I believe it's in Canada, but I don't remember.
Okay, these are different regions. What I'm telling you, like we were in the Arctic and now they're in Canada.
This is still the Arctic. So the Arctic is sort of anything above the Arctic Circle, about 66 degrees.
Oh, no, but what happens in the Arctic affects all the regions. Too.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I'm telling you. Like that house is in Canada. It's not in the Arctic, like it's in Canada. And it's with permafrost there, you know, like it's coming down to us. It's, you know, it's like, it's getting to us. That's what I'm telling you.
No, so, you know, and this is a road. So, you know, you can imagine the added cost if you have to rebuild your road every year. Every time the permafrost melts, you need to reconstruct it. And there are ways of building on permafrost to let the permafrost thaw a little bit, but those only take so much variation before they turn into exactly here. And this is a map of Russia's oil field. And you can see the darker, all up in here is permafrost. And so much of this is built on permafrost, and the oil field, the pipes are running at half capacity because otherwise they weigh too much that they're breaking through the ground. And then you're getting into the leaks and all sorts of issues that are then, you know, spills that aren't being cleaned. So, you know, what melts somewhere, you know, pick a town up here, one of these melts, and it's, you know, it's affecting the oil supply to China and to Europe and Asia. So,
oh my God, like
it's just an example of Russia's oil.
I mean, it's so annoying. Like, Mr. Putin, if you're looking at us and you're like listening to this or some way, can you see what is going on? Or let me see. Okay, you already know this. What are you doing? You know, we are all affected by what you're doing. Just saying. Yeah,
so I'm in a couple months heading up to this region right in the north of Yamal to look at some of the oil up there. They're building new oil fields, and it's right in the middle of Nenets reindeer herding regions. And so I'm gonna go spend some time with the reindeer herders there and look at how the different people are coming together. But, you know, going back to that first image that I showed briefly, this is partly permafrost melting, but it's also soil erosion, and this is the sea level rise. You know, this is Alaska, and it's the town of Shishmaref, which is a barrier island off the coast, and they're trying, again, just like Kiribati country, they're trying to relocate their entire village, and say that, again, it's an Arctic village, but we have villages on the equator that, again, are needing to relocate because of sea level rise. So this is something that's an Arctic process, but affecting us around the world. So I think with this, I just want to share, I'm going to share a couple images of my own research, which is probably not as exciting.
I mean, but you were there, right? Like, yeah, I was going to ask you that. You were there, you know what you are talking about. And how did you get affected by all of this? Like, it was like really emotional, like really bad emotional to say, like, I am so impotent that I don't know how can I help all of this, right?
Yeah, and I think this right here, this was my time with the British Antarctic Survey, which I was working there when I was in college. And what I was doing was studying sediment that comes out of subglacial volcanoes. So I'll give you a demonstration of that in a moment. But I studied sediment that basically is exposed as a volcano erupts underneath a glacier. It lifts up the glacier and it creates, in effect, a subglacial tsunami. So a number of years before I was there, a volcano erupted. This volcano under the glacier erupted, and it created this sort of tsunami, these channels. If you think of lava, but it comes out under the ice, so it has to melt the ice around it. And it creates, in this case, instead of sort of a hot molten lava, it sort of rocks and sediment, although there is some more typical lava as well that comes out. And so these create these ridges. So if you think about all that lava on a volcano, if that were carved into ice, you see all these little ridges.
Do you have an image about that? Because I am trying to picture what you're telling me. Yeah, and I'm like, okay,
exactly.
Volcano, the lava. Okay, oh, there you go.
This is a little diagram. It's not a brilliant one, but this is will show you a little bit of a subglacial volcano, and it fills up this under ice lake that held four cubed kilometers of water. And that lake overflowed. So that's what you're going to see here. So you see that it's melting the ice as the volcano heats up.
Oh my God, like yeah, I see.
Yeah, and the lake is filling, and then it's going to get so much melt that it is going to burst.
Oh my God.
That water, and that's where this diagram is going to end, but you can see that it's starting to create these channels, and this is very much like lava under.
So can we prevent that, or is like a natural disaster from the volcano? We cannot do something.
That's natural, except again, we're seeing that these natural disasters are becoming increasingly impacted by.
Right, because of that's our activity, right? Like it's a consequence of our results. That's what.
Exactly. So this is a photograph I took from the glacier, and this is just one right here. It's called a moraine, and it's just one channel that the lava took to get out from under the ice. And for scale, you have a couple of people right here, and they're studying using radar to study the makeup, the composition of these rock flows. So what happens, and what I find, you talk about the emotion side.
Yeah.
I
am watching this, and I am like, my heart is beating a lot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so yeah.
What you see, this is the glacier I was on. I have two photographs of it, and I'll show. This is 1999. This is quite a long time before I was there, but this is what the glacier looked like. And you had that, this was it last year. So you can see that it's a lot less, and it's retreated quite a lot. So these here, these channels that you're seeing, these rocky outcrops, that's sort of what I was looking. The image before, that's sort of where this is. This is a different part of that glacier, so this one's slightly shown differently. This is another image, again, 1999, and that's it last year. Okay. So, you know, it's that I think is where I get emotional, because when you're there in the field, you don't necessarily see the day-to-day change. You see that as the glacier retreats, you're left with the sediment that we were studying. So you know the glacier's retreating, but you don't see it daily. You see it, you know, less abruptly. And right. But that said, I mean, it's still an active process. If we think about Greenland is losing per second of every day last year. It lost the average of 6 Olympic swimming pools of water. So if you think about how much water fits in an Olympic swimming pool, and you think of 6 of those per second, per day, for the entire year last year, that's how much water is being dumped out from Greenland into the Atlantic North Sea around Greenland that's contributing. So, you know, there are these changes that you can see quite quickly. So this is a quick process. So that's a little bit of just some imagery of where I was in Iceland. And I'll just quickly, I know we're running out of time, talk for a moment Norway. I was in Norway. I moved to northern Norway, to a town near Tromsø, which is the blue star there, and far north of Scandinavia. And it's a region. Well,
Norway, Sweden, Denmark, they're like countries that are very good in green living, right? They are like very conscious of that, or not. That's what the news says. No, oh my gosh. This says alert for here. Really? They're not so like that? Oh my gosh.
They do a lot, but Norway, for example, makes a lot of money off of oil. So it's still producing its oil.
Who is these guys? We always talking about the same thing. Like everybody is disguised through the ambition and the money and whatever, and they don't understand that we are having like giving future generations an earth that is like literally destroyed by human beings, right?
Exactly.
And we didn't create it. I will always say the same thing. Like we think that we have the authority to destroy something that we didn't create. God created Earth, not us. So we are literally the guardians of it, and we are doing harm to something that we did not create. That is so bad, so wrong. And let me ask you something about this, Norway. Susana, you literally were chairing or are chairing a team with the United Nations, like Ocean Decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so that has not too much to do with Norway, except I was focusing on the Arctic Ocean, and that's obviously in that region. But yeah, Norway, I mean, it's the 7th largest oil producer exporter in the world. And it gets around a lot of its climate issues by saying that it exports out of the country. So its emissions that it keeps domestically is able to keep them low, but it's still supporting oil. Finland, for example, is saying that it's counting peat, which is sort of its bogs ground. It's saying that it can burn that because it's counting that as a renewable resource, which it's not, and it's contributing to fossil fuel. It's a fossil fuel, and it's contributing to reductions. So that's, the ways that these countries can frame how they're looking good without actually acting that way itself. But I guess what I want to say about Norway is this area is an indigenous region. It's known as Sapmi, and it's home to the Sami people, who are best known as reindeer herders, although only about 10% herd today. And so I was here and just want to talk a little bit about how climate change impacts people on a daily basis, because it's fine to understand that the polar bears are losing their territory and they're losing their food, and communities or water is rising, ice is melting, but how does it impact people who are living here daily? So what I just want to look at quickly is how the changing land is affecting its ability to support reindeer. And so one way is it's impacting the ability of reindeer herders to complete their annual migration. They have feeding grounds in the winter and in the summer, and they travel between these two regions. It can take about 2 weeks of travel. Reindeer are walking, and people are either walking or on snowmobile, snow scooter with them. And the weather is becoming increasingly unpredictable. So instead of being snowy in the winter, it might be rainy in January. And if the snow melts, they can't make that same crossing. So there are lots of issues with that. One, predators, so wolves, are more stealthy, more likely to get into the reindeer in non-snowy conditions. They have their young, their offspring. They want to have their offspring in the spring after the snow has melted. But if the snow systems change, because again, global climate change isn't about never warming necessarily, it is overall, but it's also about the disruption. So, they can get stuck. They don't want to have their calves. Their calves aren't going to survive if their calves suddenly are born in the snowy regions. And it can just make them a lot more vulnerable and the travel a lot more difficult if they're also traveling with their young, with all the little baby reindeer. So it makes it a lot more harder to predict, but it also puts pressure on food, pastimes, income. There's, in this region, 33%, 1/3 suicide rate right now.
Oh my God.
People don't have the ability to pursue their lifestyle, and without the ability to, help their families and support themselves and feel like they're making some kind of contribution to their communities.
I didn't know this region. Like I literally didn't know about it. And it's literally how we get the picture for United States, Russia, or China, the biggest, the ones that are in the action of not doing things okay. And we forget about people that are so far away, and they're so so innocent for everything, and they are so alone in a lot of things, mm-hmm. right? And it's very sad. It's very sad. But how can we help them? I mean, is there some donation page or something that we can give to the public? You don't know who's watching. Maybe they can have some kind of help.
No, absolutely. And I wasn't prepared with donations for these individuals specifically, but I work with them, and so I will give everybody my email address again, and happy to reach out to me. I can put anybody in contact with many people around the world, or in the Arctic anyway, in different regions. But looking at this image, I think this will be pretty much the last image I'll share right here because we're running out of time. But I think what I want to remind you is that when we're looking at 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade, that here is 8 degrees. So, change in this region for these people, it's not 2 degrees centigrade, it's 8 degrees centigrade. That's a huge change. So, that's where things are really getting amplified. And so looking at these reindeer herders, reindeer eat lichen. If the snow, they'll bury through the snow to get the lichen. If there's not enough snow when they're in their winter grounds, they'll trample it and it will die, and they won't be able to have the food the next year. If the snow is icy, which is what it has been recently, they can't get the food. They physically cannot access it and they will starve. And people who have these herds, they don't have 10 reindeer. Some of them have thousands and thousands of animals, and they're basically free range. So they can't necessarily go out and, give a little bit more food to make sure they're all getting sufficient food. They do that, but they can't necessarily make sure they're all eating enough. Food also is very expensive. So they're now having this, they're no longer able to rely on food source that they would normally have. They have to provide extra. So we have the person on the right, on the left, who's providing more food. And then on the right, we have Jonah Utsi, who's having to dig through the ice because his reindeer can't. So he's trying to get lichen. Again, thousands of animals to get enough lichen for one reindeer a day. Imagine doing it for thousands, and imagine doing it every day. In the lower left, lower right, we have Daniel Vukland, who is watching his reindeer by drone because the snow is so unstable, he can't actually be with his animals. So he is using drones to fly over the herds and direct them. And he can watch them from that, but he can also play sounds and dog barkings and to try to direct his herd through using the drone when he can't actually be there with them. So those are just a couple ways in which, this community has to adapt, but it's changing new migration routes because they used to, where they could cross a river before, they may not be able to cross it now. And it's not uncommon for animals to fall through the water and fall into the water. And while they can swim, it's really hard to swim in a river that's covered in, mostly in ice, and a lot of animals don't make it. So, it's impacting all sorts of, lives and people who are there. And it's hard because
this reminds me about environmental justice.
Exactly.
And I was going to literally ask you about that. I know that we know what is, but maybe somebody in the audience does not know. So I will ask you, what is environmental justice and why we call it like that?
So environmental justice it started to be used in about the 1980s, I believe, and it started to look at the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. So, for example, picking on this region here, another issue they're having is mining. And some of the mining is very old. Some of the mining is more new because people want electric cars, which they're saying are more environmentally friendly. To get those batteries, the material for the batteries, the metals, they're mining for them, and they're mining in regions that tend to be indigenous areas because those are people who are not impacting the policy. So that's one example where reindeer herders here are running into areas that always had before, but now the state is there, the government saying we need this land because we're going to mine it for batteries or for the material for the batteries. So that's one example of these cars that would benefit many people. They're not benefiting this community, but one of the burdens is on this community.
And how is this varies? How is environmental justice different from other forms of climate action?
So it's different because it focuses on who's benefiting and who is being impacted. Okay. So other forms of climate action tend to focus on more just about who's benefiting. What are the goods that we can do? How can we make the most benefit? And that's great. But when your benefit also comes with harm, who are you harming? And are you harming people who have a voice? Are you harming people because you know you can get away with it, because you know they don't have a voice? You know, I was listening to a talk last year, this from the Sami woman here, and she said, you know, why are we mining in my land? We're mining in my land because, not because there are minerals here, but because the government doesn't think anybody lives here. She said, you know, there are probably just as many minerals under Oslo. Why don't we mine under Oslo? Well, we don't mine there because it's a city, because the government is there, because it's built up and it's people live there, so to speak. So it's that sort of tension between who's benefiting and who are you harming, and are they on board with it? I mean, you know, if the community that's benefiting is also the community that's taking a hit, that's different to
yeah,
justify.
and also, like, who gives you the right
exactly
to step on another human being's right? You are not the owner of the human being that you're like literally abusing. So and you don't agree with it. So like, who gives you the right because you have a position? Yeah, maybe yes, you can like use the power of that position to literally kill others, but it's gonna be coming the justice for you, and that is like a law. So you know that you were speaking and it's incredible that we're speaking all the time to the same subject, you know, like we are in CORRIE for humanity, but it's not only environmental justice, it's human rights, it's women, it's children, like poverty, like everything, like all the SDGs, like we are there for CORRIE for humanity, for all SDGs around the world. There's a lot of things that we need to change, and a lot of policy making legislators that they need to do that, take action, just do whatever they can to just help others, you know. And which environmental policies do you think that are needed, like right now?
So, I mean, I think it's so true with the sustainable development goals that you have all of these different goals and they're all intertwined. You know, it's education, it's women's rights, it's children's rights, it's poverty, it's infrastructure, I mean, it's healthcare. They're all impacted, and you can just weave around to figure out how each one impacts the others, and you can draw direct lines from climate to each of them. So I think for me, where I become most disheartened with environmental policy now is the role, as I mentioned earlier, but it's not just America, it's around the world, the role that the fossil fuel industry is playing, you know, that they are governing so much of policy. And they are such a big global player that when governments are making policy, they're often making compromises. And these compromises are not always public, but they're making compromises with fossil fuel industries because they know that that's where they're getting money. And the fossil fuel companies have enough money to pay billions and billions of dollars. And so they're paying the politicians to agree certain things, and they're also funding their own disinformation so that the public isn't any wiser. So I think that's the big policy that I keep stumbling on is, you know, what if we didn't have the fossil fuels? What if we didn't have this disinformation?
Yes, and also, you know that we have Glasgow COP26 right away, and what do you think that, or what do you expect? Maybe not. What do you expect to be the result in that COP26, and also, what do you expect the next report from the IPCC will be?
The COP26 is going to be in November in Glasgow. I'm hoping to go. I'm still sorting funding, so I'm hoping to go. And it will be partly influenced by that first IPCC report that came out 2 weeks ago, the one that's code red. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have the full synthesized report, but we do have 4,000 pages of material to go on. And so that will that will impact a lot and hopefully generate some concern that what we're doing is not enough. And we know that so far. We know that countries that have said this is their contribution, we know we're blowing past 2 degrees. We might blow past it within the next 20 years. So I think there's that increased anxiety that this is now. It's now or it's never, frankly, to make that chance. We have that chance. But that said, you know, policies are made there by the government. They're not made by lobbyists. They're not made by different interest groups. They're made by representatives, delegates of the countries. And many of them do not have climate as their big concern. So whether they can add stipulations or whether it's going to be a wait and see, you know, we're still going to go on this blind hope. And I feel that that's really where we're going with COP26, is this blind hope that we have our 2050 target and we'll go there. And it's still far enough away that we can say, we're not going to make the change now. We're going to make it next year. We're going to make it next year. And that's
how we come here. That's how we end here, like in the corporate community, right? Like, right. Okay, no, we're good. We can, like, you know, like dance over the, like, we're good. And no, we're in code red. Like, you want to stop sharing screen so I can.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry.
Oh yeah, it's okay. So this is one of the things that we need to understand, that we are in code red, and they need to, like, the legislators and the ones that are in the positions of power, they need to be making policies that give us, all of us, the earth and the human beings, an interconnected goodness of connection and being aware of everything that is going on. And I mean, whatever they're doing about the oil and whatever they're thinking that they are doing, if the 2 degrees Celsius in the earth comes, the global warming will be so bad that they will not even have to work. I mean, right. Nobody will be breathing. Like, it's so illogical, you know. It's not that you will lose money, you will lose your life. And that is, like, if you cannot understand that because you have 3 televisions instead of 1, oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh. I mean, we need to pray for humanity so much, because I mean, it's incredible how we tend to, like, destroy things that we do not create, you know, like, it's incredible instead of being good. But I mean, it's our DNA. Like, I always say, like, God is watching us and he's like, when are you going to draw near me so I can just draw on you? And I just show you the way how to do things, because I created Earth and I know how it works. So just draw near me and I will draw near you, and let's go together and let's be the gardens that God wants us to be. So, but do we still have hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that did come out of this report as well, and I mean, I know I keep referencing this report, but again, I just want that scientific background that this isn't my opinion. This isn't anybody's opinion. This is physics, and physics doesn't care whether you believe in climate change, whether you believe in certain political orientations. It doesn't care. Physics is physics, and it's beautiful for that. But you know, one thing that came out of this report is that we do still have a chance, but we need to act, and we need to act now, and we need to act aggressively. So it's really hard for me reading that, having that, and again, you know, because I knew a lot of what was in the report before it came out, it wasn't as much of a surprise to me as it was for many people. But seeing this report come out and then seeing President Biden acknowledge it, and he put out a statement about how it's a disaster and we need to act on this climate crisis immediately. And then he turns around and this policy is going in a different direction. And it's, how do we get people to understand, you know, we're not making it any easier for ourselves. We're not necessarily, we keep talking about not having the money to make these changes. We have the money. We have the money if we want to do it. And it's a systemic change. You know, it's great for not eating meat. It's great to have that plant-based diet, to look at whether we need to be driving or whether we can walk, whether we can use bicycles, whether, you know, maximizing our intent in anything we do. But ultimately, we need systemic change. And so.
Yeah, I'm thinking that also I have a lot of like subjects like Mars and the invasion of Mars, and my dear friend Joshua May, if you're watching, hey Joshua, don't hate me. I don't understand how we put money there when we need money here to do everything, like to the field works and the people that are in the field works, and just money to literally know how to create a clean energy economy, a green living for everybody, and just understand that we are in code red. So yeah, President Biden, I am thinking about Kamala Harris, like, you know, that everything that she said and everything he said in the campaign, and we're coming to the same thing again, like Carrie over there, that I had a lot of hope. My hope is like, oh my gosh, God, I'm going to pray for these people. Like, you know, like, what are you doing if you know what is going on? You know, I don't care how many pressures you have, you are the president, you are there just to say no to this ambition, you know? So, yeah, so we are in a code red for humanity, not only for the earth, but our minds and hearts. We are in a code red for all the evil that we are bringing and destroying this earth, that it's in our DNA, but we have hope. We have hope to bring the goodness, and we have hope. If we didn't have a hope, we were not here being educating and being aware of everybody else. And I know that God is in control, and I know that everything in our hearts and minds, if He is in our lives, will be better. So thank you so much, Susana. I literally, if you allow me, I will literally ask you again to come with these people. If you know these people, we can have a table with these people from something, so they can talk about it, and you can also like give us more information about them, and just let the people know that there are other regions that are also very vulnerable to climate change, and we don't even know that they're even existing.
Exactly. So, and I think I'll just share my screen one more time to just give anybody my email address if there's
interest. Yes, please do it.
Reaching out. Let's see. How did I do this again? So if anybody wants to reach out to me and connect with any community, please feel very welcome. Love emails, love talking with people and nothing. So.
Thank you so much. There you are. There you have the email and your Twitter, so everybody can get in contact with you, and just whatever they need, you have your email and Twitter there. Susana, thank you for this literally live climate talk, and so amazing information that you brought us, and so goodness that you brought us, because being educated about what happens in the world and being educated about we do not understand, and being wise when other people that are experts speak, I think that is one of the things that we need. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for saying yes. And definitely, I will need to talk to you again soon.
Sounds wonderful. I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Carrie. And for everybody else, remember, there is no planet B, so step up.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your education. Thank you for your awareness. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your field, Susana. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so this is one of our Code Red for Humanity topics today in this vision section from Lima. I am literally in shock for what we had in images, and I know that you are too. So just God bless everybody, and we have hope. We have hope. We just need to take action and be aware and educate ourselves, first for us, so we can help others. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I meet you again in September with another fantastic Live Climate Talk in Vision in Lima, the World Environmental Lawyers League. Thank you. God bless you all.
Gracias.